Okay, folks, it's 6:30, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. And as we've done before, since we do have some audience today, it might be a good idea if we had the board of people up here identify themselves. I'm Herb Ogden, I live in Mount Tabor, I'm the chair. Let me start with Melanie and go around.
Melanie Virgilio, I live in Sunderland.
Jim Salzgiver, I live in Dorset.
Jeff Wilson, Manchester.
Randy Lowe, Superintendent of the VRSU.
Oliver DeMayo, Dorset.
John Wilson, Manchester.
David Chandler, Dorset, and clerk.
Ben Freeman, I live in Landgrove.
Alex Wild, I live in Danby.
Lindsay Ralph, Danby.
Madison King, Danby.
Deb Linus, Weston.
And as usual, the first thing we have is a 10-minute time for public comment. We'll also perhaps take public comment later, but that's not guaranteed. Although there is a guaranteed public comment time at the end, just before an executive session. Anybody want to comment on anything? All right.
Okay. Can I get a call over here?
Yes.
Do I just stand up?
Yeah.
Okay.
And your name is?
Sorry, Megan Galt, Sunderland. I'm just here to make a brief statement regarding one important aspect of Sunderland Elementary's future that we believe isn't being taken into consideration. I'm a teacher in this community. My husband is an administrator in a neighboring school district, and our daughter attends Sunderland now, and our son will be entering kindergarten in 2026. We trust the board and administration of the Taconic Greens to make a good decision about the future of Sunderland Elementary. The one aspect we felt was important to discuss is the impact inter-school district choice is having on Sunderland's enrollment, and the problem this creates if a definitive long-term decision about the school's future is not made soon. As Sunderland residents, we have watched neighboring families enroll their children in other schools in recent years, and we are already hearing of more planning to request school choice for next year as a direct result of these conversations. It is understandable that this process is leading families to make decisions now to ensure stability for the future of their children's education. Our concern is that a decision will be delayed, and we will enter next year with uncertainty but no choices. Our family does not wish to request school choice. We love Sunderland Elementary, and we could not do so even if we wanted to. As a family with two working parents, we would be unable to meet the responsibility of providing transportation that is a requirement of school choice families. We fear we will be left to watch more students depart, leaving those who remain with an even smaller community and reduced opportunity. We feel strongly that a delay in making a definitive decision about the long-term future of the school will disproportionately affect families like ours who wish to stay and would present an equity issue for those who wish to leave but cannot. An early and definitive decision would alleviate this uncertainty for many families and would also provide reassurance or early notification to the staff and administration of the school as they plan for their future. We appreciate the thoughtful process that is taking place, but please understand that these conversations about the future have an impact on what is happening in the present. Thank you.
Have you put that in the comments that we had a QR code for at the various forums?
Something similar, but I can post this.
Please do, yeah. Any other comments? All right. Take a moment, please, to review the board goals.
Yeah, did you?
Do we have anybody online comment? If you're online and you want to comment, please use the hand raise feature. That makes it easier to find you. Don't see any. Am I missing something here?
Nope, I don't see it either.
Okay.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah. The board goals are on back to page 2. Remember that we add the 5th goal. And then now is one of the times the board should say they think they're not using those goals. No comments. Would someone like to move the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Alex. Is there a second? Seconded by Lindsay. Remember, if you want something taken off the consent agenda, you just have to say so. See if you're doing that. All right, all board members in favor of passing the consent agenda, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, please raise your hand or say nay. Anybody abstaining? Consent agenda passes. Next thing is the Community Engagement Committee update. And would the member of the Community Engagement Committee care to move that the members of that committee accept the minutes of October 17th. Melanie. So moved by Melanie, is there a second? Seconded by Lindsay. Any discussion among the committee? Seeing none, all the committee members in favor of accepting the minutes of October 17th, please raise your hand. Anybody opposed, please raise your hand. Anybody abstaining? It appears to pass unanimously. It does. The next item under that is to update the media distribution list. In your packet, you have page 8, a list of the primary outlets we've been using. You see one is missing here. We don't have the Mount Tabor and Danby forums listed there. Could you make a note of that, please? Dorset too,
And Weston.
and Weston. Weston has a front porch forum, okay?
Sunderland has one through Arlington, Sunderland, Sandy.
Okay, so we should add Arlington, Weston, Mount Tabor, Danby,
Probably Londonderry.
and Dorset.
Montgomery, Landgrove.
Yeah.
I think though, Herb, that, I just want to just check in, I think it's like town-specific social media forums is the next one, so these, I believe, Bob, you can correct me, these are the ones that we are able as a system to post to. And the next agenda item was to talk about those town-specific ones, and if people wanted to take primary responsibility for sharing information to those forums, since we can't from our office,
Right.
okay? So, I don't know if we just want to kind of split those two apart
Yeah.
for this purpose.
Yeah, B and C. Does anybody see on packet page 8 any outlet that people are allowed to post regardless of where they live that ought to be on the list? All right, let's go to the, yeah.
Are we not using Bennington Banner?
Excuse me?
Are we not using the
Bennington
Bennington banner?
That kind of goes with the Manchester Journal. Sometimes they
Okay.
run it, in either newspaper, basically. They make that call, editorial.
Do we need to distinguish between Manchester Journal Facebook and just Manchester Journal in general?
They're both.
Anything else that would be something that the office can post to regardless of whether anybody in the office lives there?
Can you clarify what, we sometimes collaborate with school parental organizations? What's that mean?
So, like a,
Bob will, do you want to answer that or want Bob to answer it?
Yeah, that's just when you do a posting, you can, when you put it on Facebook, you have an option to collaborate with one other partner. So like, for example, we recently did a story on MEMS, we collaborated with the MEMS parent organization.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah, so that's an option that we do.
Moving
Did
into
the, I'm not sure whether this was covered by what Randy was saying, front page forum, you're using that some.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay,
I was corrected that
Okay.
belongs under a part C, not part B.
okay.
All right, now, under part B, we've already listed a number of front porch forums, but the difficulty there is you can post to those only if you live in the area that the forum serves. So, I don't know whether we need to do it right now, but if you live in a town that has a front porch forum and you're willing to post things there, I think the thing to do would be to let me and probably Randy and Bob know, and that way they can send stuff to whoever agrees to post it.
Can we just state it now for the minutes, since there's multiple people in multiple towns?
I'm sorry, do what now?
For instance, I will claim the Arlington Sunderland region, and post to the Arlington Sunderland Sandy form.
Okay, so we have one volunteer, and I've volunteered from the huge front porch forum in Mount Tabor.
I can do Weston.
I could do Dorset.
Okay, Jim will do Dorset.
Or should Bob? Well, either one.
Or, yeah, Bob, well,
You have better name recognition than I do.
or are we, is Danby and Mount Tabor separated now?
They created a new one now, so it's
Yeah.
two different
Well,
front porch
if
forums.
Danby's unique, I'll do it
Okay,
for
Alex
Danby.
will do Danby. And do we have any others that anybody wants to volunteer for? You mentioned there's some up on the mountain.
Yeah, and I know that I get, in
The Weston.
Landgrove, but I get Weston's posts on my Landgrove page, so I don't know that we need to double that
No,
one.
okay.
Is it called a Weston Land Grove forum? It normally says
No,
like in
but
the
it's
header.
like, but I get, like, just as the Landgrove one, you see Londonderry, Peru, Weston all
Okay.
pop up.
Should we all be sending a consistent message?
Well, the idea here would be that when the district has something they want to communicate, if the district knows which of us have agreed to post it, the district sends it to us, we post it.
Okay.
Because that has not been happening up until now. Melanie?
We recommend, the VSBA has a system that's set up this way where we have a spreadsheet in it. Has everybody listed where their responsibility is to post and the message is right in that spreadsheet, so it's an easy copy paste. If we could put something together like that, I can also show you what that looks like. And then we can be accountable.
All right, and now, aside from the front porch forums, is there anything else that we ought to be using and not? Yeah.
I'm gonna assume, but, you know, the problem with that, that we're emailing the schools and principals, and then the principals disseminate to parents and parent-teacher groups. Should I assume that, or is that something that we might wanna also consider?
Randy, can you
So
speak to
we,
that?
I guess we do that for some things, but I don't, Bob, I don't think we have like a well-defined system of determining what would and what wouldn't, but I know everything is not.
No, usually it's, you know, it depends on something where you want to talk directly to families. Like recently on the forum, we sent out information with links using the email box. But we can sit down and go over that.
And I guess that is sort of, maybe, we don't have it on here, but a secondary question is, when and for what do we
Does the board email?
do this?
Well, I would assume the board would say basically anything that has any public concern whatsoever, right?
Like every board meeting?
Yeah.
Well-
Anything else?
Maybe recommend that this is the start, and maybe the next community engagement meeting we really put together, we talk about what we want to post and how often, right? Because we know we overload with emails, it's not gonna be read. And if we can be consistent about, you know, we post our board meetings and agenda, and then if there's, you know, I feel like if we think it's important to write to the forums, we probably should include the schools too.
I'm sorry, we should include,
Schools and families. Or we
we
just-
put on the December agenda, maybe a comment from either Bob or Randy or both about what, well, I guess more questions for them about the sort of things they want us to have posted? Is that where you're driving in?
Or parameters, sure, maybe limitations.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like if we're going to post something to a forum, we should post it also to families directly.
Also, just a thought on something like Front Porch Forum, you know, if we posted up an agenda like that, that would be kind of overwhelming potentially. I don't know whether it makes sense to have a sort of an announcement on a link or something like that.
Yeah, you can do, I did that with the Mount Tabor forum, because it's easy to do. All right, anything else on that topic?
Well, I think it goes back also, I think there should be strategy. If we put a link in, we won't reach as many people. So, and we typically, you know, when we're posting board meetings, we have our system, which, you know, it goes out to the public, it's posted in the regular places. But if the board is interested in us communicating every board meeting through a different mechanism, I just think we should just have clarity about that. Is it short-term, is it forever, is it a change in what we're doing as a board as far as communicating? I just think I would want some clarity to better understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and
Well, does anybody on
If
the
it's a
board
change
think
in
that we
practice.
should not be notifying the public of every meeting?
but we do.
Well, using these links. Yeah, Lindsay?
I guess just for me, we get a lot of emails from the schools, so, you know, I think we get like monthly updates of what's going on with the school for the month, so maybe in that email can be something about an upcoming, board meeting, but I would save like a separate email for things like if we wrote a letter to the legislature, like update the parents that way, but I would think like the board meetings, if the schools can put them in their monthly emails, that might prevent tons of emails. I don't know if every school does a monthly email like that too, but I just, you know.
I don't think I've seen other school boards or other town boards or anybody posting all their agendas on Front Porch Forum. They may not even accept them.
I know they accept them for Mount Tabor anyway.
Oh,
Now, again, what
Danby as
I
well.
posted was not the agenda, I posted a link to the
Oh.
whole thing. And it's very easy to do
yeah.
that. I have seen towns that routinely post notices of select board meetings, for example.
I think Danby, that's their primary posting, I think, isn't it, guys? Yeah.
I mean, it strikes me, just me personally, if looking at Front Porch Forum tells you when the select board meets, looking at Front Porch Forum ought to tell you when the school board meets too. Melanie?
So should we set up a meeting to set parameters on what we set for the schools, for the community engagement?
I guess we should, yeah.
If the board decides they'd like us to meet, that's my question.
It might help if the community engagement folks could stick around after this meeting, maybe we can find the next time we can meet.
Great.
I'll write it down here, so hopefully I won't forget. There'll be somebody next to me can remind me before I disappear.
Okay.
Leave that up to you.
I might be running away too.
Okay, anything else on that topic? All right, you have the survey results for policy 2.7. Anybody see any difficulties there? Starts on page 9, graph on packet page 10. Looks like most people who commented say, yes, the policy needs to be changed because it looks like the 1 year applies to everything, and that doesn't work for employment contracts, right? Somebody here, I know the policy committee chair is still overseas, but would somebody in the policy committee agree to make sure that the policy committee takes that up so that we do have a change to vote on eventually? Thanks. Okay, into the superintendent's update. Randy, anything you either need to update there or particularly call our attention to?
It's not particularly long. I don't know that there's a lot in here that I need to comment on. I'm happy to answer any questions folks have, but given the rest of the agenda, I don't need to drag this part out too much. I think it's fairly self-explanatory.
Any questions, observations? Okay. Into the governance process. We have a vacancy that we need to fill, and on page 16, you have a letter from the person who's willing to fill the vacancy. It's the person, the board member who lives in Peru. Would someone care to move that we appoint Jessica Higginson-Scully to fill the seat that's reserved for Peru?
I have a question. Her email says she's in the process of moving, so has she officially moved?
Yes, right, Celeste? Yes,
Yes.
she is a resident.
Okay, yeah, the email was September 26th, so she arrived in the meantime. I don't have a motion yet. Lindsay?
So moved.
Okay.
Second?
By Lindsay, second by Jim. Any discussion?
Just a quick, I know we this is a good one for that communication methodology where I know some messages were sent out. And this is the only response received from our communications that we had a need, right?
Correct.
Yep. Okay.
Right.
All right, are you ready to vote on the motion?
You want me to speak to that?
Sure.
So I got an email from her, explaining that she was moving to the area and wanted information. And so I responded back, by the way, we're also looking for a school board member. But that's how that's how we got it.
Bless you.
Has anybody met with Jessica?
Did you all hear the question, has anybody met with her? Not that I know of.
Not yet.
I think it may, if I may
Yeah.
comment, I think it may be wise to have a conversation to know that she fully understands what the nature of the position is and the commitment requirements.
Well,
I don't know if that
we-
has been
we-
communicated fully.
yeah, we have a calendar problem in that we only have 30 days from the date of the previous member's resignation to fill the slot, and this is the meeting in which we would have to do it. But David and Dick and I always meet with the new member to orient them. So I guess if she discovered, oops, this isn't what I thought it was, well, she could resign, but let's hope not. Yes, Melanie, and then John.
Do we know if she was made aware of tonight's meeting? I'm assuming she's not here.
I don't know, do you know?
I mean, I don't know if you communicated with her at all, or.
She was aware of this meeting tonight, but I didn't express that she needed to be at the meeting.
Got it, thank you.
And often we've appointed people who were not at the meeting. It happens more often that way than not. John?
She has to run in March anyway.
Yeah. Okay, you ready to vote? All those in favor of the motion to appoint Jessica Agnesons-Broley, please raise your hand or say aye. Anybody opposed, please raise your hand. Anybody abstaining, please raise your hand. It appears to be, oh, you're abstaining, okay. Melanie, you have one abstention, otherwise passes. And we have a proposed revision in policy 2.5.1. It's on packet page 16. Anyone care to move that we adopt the recommendation of the policy committee?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, seconded by
Deb.
Awesome.
Deb, okay. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor, please raise your hand or say aye. Anybody opposed, please raise your hand or say nay. Anybody abstaining? Appears to pass unanimously. Does. Okay.
Makes sense, but fast.
We have the work plan.
I don't know who wrote that. Didn't read too well.
I noticed one thing that doesn't fit in the roster in the system very well, but probably the location of the annual meeting ought to be in the work plan, shouldn't it? On page 19. It was what we voted on last year.
I don't remember what we
Yeah, that's my problem. I can't remember what it was either. There probably
Have
should
we
be in the work
not-
plan. Anything else about the work plan? All right. So we're down to the 8th item on the agenda, which says discussion, ideas for discussion of our schools. Let me make a proposal to get this organized. My proposal would be that we begin with a motion for the superintendent at some time, not necessarily the next meeting, to present her number one recommendation. If that motion passes, then what we could do is spend considerable time listing for the superintendent whatever priorities we think that she should be paying attention to in making that recommendation. Would that work?
I still need to feel like we have to discuss all the information that we talked about before we can work on recommendations. So I don't know if I'm ready to.
No, I'm not asking anybody to propose a particular priority tonight, but I think that we need to make it clear whether it's going to be up to the superintendent, after hearing everything that she's heard and after hearing us tonight, whether it's going to be up to her to say, here's what I recommend and here's why, or whether it's going to be superintendent giving us 4 choices, 6 choices, whatever it is, and say, okay, folks, take what you like. I'm a little concerned that if we don't have something to focus on, our discussion tonight is going to go around in circles. Jeff and then Melanie.
Yeah, Herb, I think that's the way to go. It's a good idea, and I would make that motion.
Thank you. Okay, so it's moved by Jeff that we
Second.
direct the superintendent at some meeting, not necessarily this one, the next one, to propose her preferred solution. Is there a second? Oh, seconded by David, okay. All right. Everybody clear on what the motion is? It's not adopting any particular option, it's just saying, we want her to come back to us at some point and say, here's what I think you want to do, explain why.
Can I, yeah.
Yes, Melanie?
I don't feel comfortable making that, voting on that yet. Because I feel like it's our role to direct the superintendent and to direct her to tell us what how to direct us, or how, what her preferred is, without us giving her any direction to pick a lane of what our preference is. Doesn't seem like it fits quite policy governance. I feel like we need to first make that direction, and then we can ask maybe for information, but to direct what the preferences of the superintendent, I don't even know that we'll ever get there.
John and then Judy.
We ask Randy her thoughts on this direction. Do you think this is in line with policy governance? This is order of operations?
So what I'm understanding is the board would vote to have me bring information to the board for consideration based on all the information collected to date, all the comments gathered throughout the process, and the information that is shared from board discussions. After all of that, come to the board with a recommendation. And that's what I'm understanding. And that could happen after tonight's meeting, it could happen after however many meetings once the conversations have happened. I do think that is most aligned with policy governance.
What does your gut tell you about it?
That, I mean, parts of my job are not, right, I don't love that, but that is probably the right way to do it. And ultimately, I guess, Herb, I'm envisioning that I would then say, okay, after, 2.5-ish years of collecting information and doing all the work, this is what I consider best, the best option for our educational system with this timeline. You then, as a board, would say, yay, nay, discuss it, adjust it, right? Is that how it would continue to play forward? Ultimately, the board would land on something that they want to move forward with.
Melanie, does that answer your concern?
Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Okay. No, I was kind of imagining something, ultimately, yes. I was imagining that this process could go through a few iterations where we are looking for additional information on possible routes so we can understand it to provide better direction to the superintendent as to what the board's thoughts are.
Right.
I will tell you that I feel as if pretty much all the information we would ever need has already been talked about or is available.
Great.
I honestly can't imagine that there's more we need to make a decision.
Melanie?
Does that mean then that you could make a recommendation to us right now without our discussion?
No,
Okay.
that's not what I'm understanding.
Okay, I'm just
I'm
asking
understanding
for
that it's
understanding.
only after the board has had a full discussion
Okay.
to the point that all board members feel as if they have discussed and shared and asked questions and done all of that. After all of that's done, the board would say, okay, now that you've heard all of this, now that we've talked everything out, we'd like you to come back to the next meeting with a formal recommendation.
I'm reiterating what Melanie just said, that's what I was gonna suggest, but I also think that during this discussion, we try to identify what are the priorities that need to be weighed. You know, we've got a number of priorities that have been discussed in the presentations, and some of them seem to conflict. So it's gonna be a matter of balancing and compromising. And so that is what we need to do tonight, I think.
John?
This makes sense. You know, I know you said a lot of the information we would need has already been put out there. You know, I just worry that, you know, maybe we'll come back with a recommendation and we'll say, oh, what about this? And so does it make sense for us to ask, to give it a little more shape and say, ask for some deliverables within that, you know, within the recommendation, such as, you know, tax modeling, student enrollment, all these, I think, would be in there anyway, but we want to spell out any criteria, or, you know, or do you feel confident that you would give us exactly what we wanted without us spelling it out?
I think that, no, I mean, none of this, right, it's iterative in nature, but I think that what the board would need to move forward, I think that there's enough information. There are certain questions that will remain that will be determined through the process that, you know, for instance, you can't model out if we don't know the price point of the projects. So, you know, one of the things I'm gonna talk about at some point tonight is looking for some direction as it relates to the work of the architects in conversations I've had with them, because the process will unpack some of that, right? Ultimately, we can do an option at this level, we can do option at this, right? Like, all of that will happen as the process unfolds. But conceptually, what would be the path forward? I have enough information to, and I will get further guidance and get a feel for where everyone on the board is through these conversations. But as far as information to work with, I do believe that we have enough information to take this first step.
In suggesting this motion, my idea was that assuming the motion passes, then the next thing you do tonight, and maybe over several meetings even, is, just as David said, to identify our priorities, and then also following up on what somebody else said, if there are parts of the recommendation that are necessary, we need to identify them. For example, if we want to know the effect on the tax rate, I'm assuming that would probably be in there anyway, but it wouldn't do any harm to say, yes, that has to be in the recommendation.
That's good.
All right, any other discussion on the motion? All right, all those in favor?
Wait, did we have a second?
Yeah.
Oh, David, okay.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. Anybody opposed, please raise your hand. Anybody abstaining, please raise your hand. Good. Now, let's talk about either things that have to be in the recommendation or priorities that you have to guide the recommendation in the first place. David?
So, there have been a lot of ideas floated around, and I think the priorities that came up, there are a number of them, but I'm going to try to summarize 3 of them for sure, which is community concerns about how it impacts individual communities, student education, the quality of student education, and not just academic, but also social development, and then cost, tax issues, and that sort of thing. And there may be some others, but those are some of the main ones. And the framework that I would like to offer is, I think that part of what we're wrestling with are two separate issues. One is we've got 9 towns and 5 schools. And so we're looking at all these things and they don't fit together. We also have something that I have unfortunately dubbed 8-10 years ago as the BBA ecosystem. We could call it something else, but it's this whole valley that everyone, 95% of the population sends their kids to BBA for high school. And then that has grown. You've got kids commuting down from the mountain to go to Maple Street. You've got the rink, and you've got a rec center that serve as recreational center points for the whole area. And so so it's not such a strange thing to think of as to take a systems analysis approach and say, well, the real system is that we're one community rather than 9 different communities. And if you see us as one community, then the idea of a regional middle school is less wrenching and less alien because it's a natural precursor to going to PBA, to start to pull kids together and to make that transition. So I offer that as a framework to begin to balance. So how do we manage community needs? How do we manage transportation requirements for kids? At what age should they do an hour or less? What age should it only be a half hour? So the framework is, are we one community or are we 9 different communities? If we're one community, I think we can find an answer. So that's how I'm framing it. Maybe that's not a good approach, but that's what I offer.
Who's next? Jeff?
Again, you certainly can't argue what you suggest, David, as far as the priorities go. Obviously, cost and educational quality are the 2 big ones from my perspective. And I'm certainly sensitive to community notion as well. But having said that, relative to the priorities, information that would be helpful, I think, in garnering in concert with those concepts are a little more evidence or background relative to the quality issue, academic quality and outcomes. The idea and the thesis that's been put forward is that we have too many small classrooms which do not benefit the student in many ways, academically and potentially socially and culturally too. And if there's any additional evidence that can be provided in concert with that, I think would be extraordinarily helpful. On the cost equation, it would be great to have a side-by-side as to juxtapose the additional costs that may be assumed on a multi-year basis due to a new facility and the savings that we might realize by closing various facilities, if indeed that is something that is being recommended. And look at those 2, what are the costs, what are the savings, and there's also some specificity associated with if we're going to eliminate certain funded positions. That's not to say we're going to fire anybody. I have no idea what's going to happen in that regard, but it's been suggested that reductions in staff can possibly take place through attrition. But to have some really good idea on the costs themselves and on the tax impacts based on the current tax system, which certainly may change in the next year or so. But based on the current tax system as to what the tax impact will be to the taxpayer, I think in those 2 arenas, I'd be looking for additional information if possible.
Melanie.
Melanie?
then it might help us break out on if and then and what first. But I think we need to really be clear about what we would like to see as a regional middle school and how we think that will play out. And I think we also need to discuss what's happening at the elementary schools. And I think they're two different conversations that relate to each other. And they're two solved problems that I think need to be solved. So breaking those out might help get some ideas flowing for us so that, we can figure one out and then figure out how that's gonna impact the second, and then we can go back and forth. It may be that our optimal outcome for the elementary schools can't be achieved because we wanna prioritize the middle school or vice versa. But I would like to propose we kind of look at it in that lens.
Deb?
One priority I would think, just in the proposal that you make, is that we heard a lot of confusion and misinformation in our audiences about what a new middle school would actually be. What would they do to this building? And a lot of the comments online were also that if we're just going to move classes from one place to another and teach the same thing, that's not worth the money. So what does a modern middle school look like that's different from what we do now? And how would this building need modifications to accommodate that, so people have a sense of what a new middle school would be like, what their kids would be getting, and what we'd be paying for. It's not just moving the science program from one place to another, just as it is. Because most people don't really, the people our age went to school, under one structure, and that's sort of what we envision as a middle school. But, what is a modern middle school? That would help. The other concern I have is that we consider, before we put anything out to a vote, how well it will be received. We don't want to, or what the climate is for a bond vote. I think it would be disastrous to put out a bond vote and have it fail, because we've seen that at other districts in the state. Then you have to revise and cut back, and it loses again. We want to present a bond vote that has a really good chance of passing, both with the timing and the amount, and with this letter we got from Governor Scott, there's just going to be a lot of pressure on us to make that work, unfortunately.
I'm not sure how to progress this conversation, but I think in listing our priorities, and I think that's helpful, Randy, for us to keep talking about that. I think I look at our ends policies and think about what we're trying to do, and it's really about our task, and what we're putting forward is about education, of the educational experience of all of the children in our district, and the financial cost to the taxpayers in our district. And those are two priorities. And I think both of those things are impacted by and have deep impacts on the community. So, the quality of engagement of the school and the learner's experience with the community that they're in has an impact on social emotional learning, sense of well-being, sense of belonging. All of those things are very real, and so that has to be a consideration. And the cost of maintaining small schools in our district will also have financial implications on our communities in the near term and long term, as we're putting a bond forward to renovate and build a big middle school. So I don't think we can tease those apart, but I think as a board, we have to elevate, because it's sort of our mandate, we have to elevate that educational piece and the financial piece to the top, and then look at how those impact and are impacted by the communities. And I think the other piece for me that weighs in, because we've made a commitment to as a board, is keep maintaining an equity lens through this work, and thinking about how our decisions how they impact our various community members through that lens. Who has the ability to pay, who is most impacted by potential school closures or consolidations and whatnot. It's really important.
I'm wondering if either of our student reps have any thoughts about whether sufficient student input in this whole process. I know Madison, you had some concern about that.
Yeah, I did try to send out a little survey, but not a lot of kids check their emails and fill it out. So, just from talk, what I've got is that, talking to people I go to school with, is that a big concern that a lot of people have is transportation. A lot of kids don't like long bus rides to a different place, hour-long bus rides and stuff. But obviously, bus rides are gonna be long if we don't have any bus drivers. So, if anyone wants to be a bus driver. And then a lot of kids, when we went to MEMS, we switched from class to class, different subjects and stuff, and I really liked that look instead of just and kids who I went to Courier with said that it was a lot better when they had to change. They like to change. And the comment I made last meeting about being in school with first graders, a lot of my friends agreed as well that it was not really beneficial, and it was kind of just a bit strange. Yeah, that's just what I got.
Any thoughts?
I think great to get more student input. I'd be happy to meet with some TNG students to make that happen. Perhaps meet with small groups of middle schoolers again and ask them some questions about what they think about this whole concept of potentially having a regional middle school. They think that it would be beneficial for them to be in an environment with more therapeutic younger students.
Makes sense to you?
Yeah, I mentor at MEMS as well, so that's something I could do too.
Okay, John, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think I echo a few things what Phil said, and also, share with my priorities, what I see as the priorities currently. Something that a woman said earlier on, stuck with me about, as she was asking about the performance of small schools, and that, the last thing she wants to do is see a well-performing school close. And so, one of my priorities is to disrupt the elementary school education as little as possible, especially if I don't know, if we don't know, the quality of education they're currently getting. I know that comes at a cost, might come at an additional cost, but that is, so getting greater clarity on the quality of education these schools are getting, these kids are getting in the smaller schools, and I know that puts, I don't know if that puts Randy in a difficult place, because now how are we sensitive when we're not comparing schools all of a sudden, but trying to get more clarity on that. And so, one of my priorities is not to disrupt, whether it's long transportation or displacing kids, disrupting elementary kids. And another top priority of mine currently is to get I want to see the 7th and 8th grade students and 7th and 8th grade teachers together sooner than later in the same space. I think there's potential for great upside there and I want to realize that upside with, how do we get better programming and, whether through professional development or using the resources we have. So how do we realize the upside of getting them together and not necessarily without, huge investments in infrastructure for the short term. And so, I think there's, again, where's the upside, and also how do we manage our risk moving forward? That's where my head's at now.
I think either you or somebody else has said one positive of what you're talking about is it would show that we're more interested in the results than we are in just brick and mortar.
Yeah, yeah. It's, and we've heard that from the community too, you know, the brick and mortar, is very costly and, may not necessarily translate to results. It's not gonna, create the programming.
Jim?
Kind of putting together a lot of those thoughts. I think, you know, one thing that's become clear to me is that, you know, through all the public engagement, is that we really haven't done a great job of making the case for why we're doing what we want to do. And that fits very much with what Deb was saying. And, you know, honestly, because there are things like the, you know, as you say, what are we looking to accomplish? And actually, there's tons of information out there. It's almost too much information out there right now. Because the visioning study, you go back and look at that, and that actually shows a lot of stuff, what we want to accomplish and all. To me, I just, with all the numbers that have flown out in recent times, you know, I love playing with numbers, so I, you know, started looking and, you know, looking at our, you know, current K-8 enrollment of 826. And I looked at, you know, the number of kids that are going to independent schools and being homeschooled. Add those kids in, and we've got over 1,000 kids. But we only have 826 in our schools. And when we look at you know, for the middle schoolers in particular, we're calling it 6 to 8, of, you know, all the kids living in our towns, you know, 23% of those kids are not going to our schools. So I'm thinking, you know, we somehow, you know, I think we need to condense, you know, if we want to make any progress with this with the community, I think we need to do a much better job of explaining ourselves as to what we're trying to accomplish. Because I think with all of us will agree that, you know, yes, it is quality of education and the money, but, you know, quality of education is kind of the #1 job, and I think that's what we're trying to attack here, is being able to provide a better quality education for our kids. And when I look at all, you know, the numbers now, you know, some of the comments from teachers and people working in the system about, you know, there's differences of opinion, but clearly a lot of educators feel that we really could do a lot better for our kids in middle school with a different structure. I think we have to, you know, make that clear. To me, again, you know, as I said, with the numbers, when you just start looking at our kids are way too many families are not finding us to be the best choice, even when they have to go out of pocket for it. So I think that I think we could do a lot better job, or I think we have to do a much better job of explaining to our communities why there is this need on the education side. And then, you know, to me, you know, we may have to invest to be able to get that. That's where the money starts coming in, and that's where you start playing with how can we, you know, make sure that we continue to be financially sustainable.
Lindsay?
Two things. One thing that, about the independent schools, talking to some parents, I think we're gonna have a really hard time convincing parents who already send their kids to independent schools to come to us. If they're paying out of pocket, they want the independent school for what it offers. So I don't know if it's worth trying to spend a lot of energy trying to convince them to come back to us, but maybe
Next generation.
prevent them.
The next group of
Yes.
kids.
But one of my priorities that I would like to see, is going off what Ben said, is equity. Because since we've enacted the interdistrict school choice, you have schools that have the parents who have the means to take them out of that school and go to a different school, leaving the rest in the school who don't have those means. So I will use Courier, because you said, I think that was 70%
FRL.
qualified for the free lunch or something along those lines. So, one, if we were to look at this, the data without the intra-district school choice, I don't think some of the smaller schools maybe would be where we are talking about under enrollment. And so I would like to look at it in a lens where, you know, without the intra-district school choice. And, because if you close, say, Courier, you're now taking the parents who don't have the means to transport their kids to a better school, closing their school, and then having them possibly travel further away, being on buses longer, and I don't think we're considering that being equitable to the parents that can't do the intra-district school choice. So I do want to keep equity being one of our priorities as well.
David?
One of the things, I'm listening to all that, to the different approaches to equity and all the rest, and it's not just equity in transportation, it's also equity in access to the best resources available. So one of the things that I heard, and I think we all heard from all of the different forums, was we can't keep the status quo. What we should do wasn't clear, but the one thing that was clear, one message was, you can't keep doing what you're doing, it doesn't work. So we need to start with that awareness. And second, the reason we got into this whole discussion is that Randy has stated several times, we all have, was the documented attrition from middle school. And we started thinking, well, maybe the answer is a regional middle school. And that was like the proverbial onion, all these different layers came out. So now I'm moving on to something that Melanie said about small classes and all the rest. We've struggled with some of the schools that might have just 5 kids in it. And if that's the cohort going through 5 years of school, that can be very difficult for those kids to learn. So they probably need more. I think the issue that we need to think about is private school size is one thing. We can't afford to run private school size classes. So for us, 15 or more is the minimum. And so we need to be thinking about that, and that's actually a different teaching approach. I've taught in small classes that were 12 and smaller. And then when I went into a public school session and was working in a public school, it took me 2 months to totally change my whole teaching style for it to work. And I almost got thrown out because I lost control of the class a lot of times. So, and powers that be weren't real impressed. So that's something we have to accept, the fact that we're not going to be a private school. We're not going to provide those resources and that kind of intense one-on-one possibility. That's provided by special ed, provided by other aspects. So that leads me to my last point, which is I think we do understand, or Randy does, what best practice is in the middle school. They have a clear idea of what they would like to do and how they would go, how a middle school should function. And the question, my only real question is, can we do it in a slow, gradual way and reconfigure, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think they have an idea of what it is, but could we begin that model within our current structures and begin to test it out and to show people that it is valid and that it is exciting, and therefore when we do need to go out to the public for a bond, they can see that we've got a product to offer. So those are my points.
John, and then Melanie?
Yeah, well, a lot I want to touch on, but I'll touch on what David, the last point David said here. You know, in this last week, I looked at, did like a cohort analysis, looking at the past 8 years of every cohort starting in kindergarten. You know, how did the enrollment change as they moved from kindergarten to 8th grade? And I found that, you know, for those last eight cohorts from K to 8, that, you know, in total, we actually, you know, after 8th grade, we added, you know, 11 kids. You know, so I thought we were going to lose kids, but we're seeing. So I looked at what happened between each grade level. And we, from 5th to 6th grade, we lost an average of 7% of our students. The enrollment dropped on an average of 7% from 5th to 6th grade. Now, from 6th to 7th grade, that jumped up 4.5%. So we lose kids going 5th to 6th and get some kids back. Now we have what the pandemic really threw some of these things off because not just us, but across the country, you know, we had a huge drop in public school enrollment. But I think, so, you know, my question got me thinking, so what's happening, okay, so 5th to 6th grade, you know, what's happening there? Is it the programming, is it perception, family perception of the programming they received so far? To what extent is that? Is it that? And to what extent is it the perception of the anticipated program of the 6th grade? And so, you know, that is the question that I have, you know, and indicates a priority, that top priority I have that I spoke about before. And again, I also agree with David, that incremental approach of, you know, developing that quality programming in those middle levels.
We've kind of already experienced an incremental approach. When the TNG was formed, the middle school students from Courier and Sunderland had choice, and we're going to Arlington and going to other places, and now they do not. So we already increased the enrollment of the middle schools by requiring Courier and Sunderland students to come into district, right? So to me, that is an incremental approach, right? We have 2 schools already that are flowing to a middle school, and we haven't changed the middle school programming because of that. I am very concerned that if we do this incrementally and I think you said test it, I think were your words. What will happen is that we will not be able.
Proof of concept.
Okay, so if we go through that process, I'm very concerned that we will not be able to really truly understand the benefits because we won't have an opportunity to fully shift the programming in the way that we want. And we may end up, sinking the idea altogether because we're not implementing it with fidelity, and then also end up forcing kids to shift around because we're finding out now we have this system that we just set up and we can't prove that it works, so therefore we can't prove kids from Floodbrook should come down here, and now we have kind of this system that was set up with hope that doesn't actually ever get to succeed.
Yeah, and I'm worried that we'll put a 40, 50, 60, $80 million bond out there and create this great vision and then find out, oh, well, that didn't do what we anticipated. And now we're stuck.
But do you think after everything that we've done, I guess I'd say, in the 2.5 years of looking at what a middle school is, are you still not convinced that we should put all of these students together? And you think that we need to prove it?
I think that we should, I think we should put them together. 7th and 8th grades, use the capacity we have, put 7th and 8th grade students together, get the teachers together. You know, we have that visioning work that was done, but if you look back at that, that's a lot there. I think it needs to be distilled. I would like to see the educators sink their teeth into it and start to craft that vision around programming and have that inform what, the brick and mortar might look like in the shape. I think I want to see, the boots on the ground, get in the weeds with it too and work to build the vision and have that shape the school down the road.
I just feel like building a vision while living in the building at the same time is too hard. It's hard to teach and implement while you're constantly changing and implementing. And I feel like we need the time. So I'll stop.
Let's hear from 2 other folks, Ben and then Jim.
So I think this is a really valuable conversation, actually, to go back and forth and think about this, because it's the question of how we implement. I mean, I think for me, that having sat through been part of an active part of the middle school committee, have participated in the visioning process, having had kid in middle school now, a bunch of it have gone through middle school, like I don't need to be convinced personally as a board member of the value of shifting our middle school programming. I feel confident about that. I do think we have to continue, we're gonna have to sort of re-engage in the, working with the public in what that looks like. And we're gonna have to really do, I think, the question of how much time does it take to build that program with the staff that we have, and what do we need to have in terms of facilities to be able to do it with enough fidelity to do it well, to have proof of concept. And I don't know if we have the answer to that yet, John, to sort of your idea, whether this facility can accommodate that with the scale of renovations we could do between now and next year. So like, is that timeline realistic or not? So I think that that is one thing that I would, if as a board we lean in that direction, I think to Randy, we would need a lot more information on, what that would really take to do that, in terms of what are the professional development needs to work on that speed, what are the renovation needs that we would need to do that with some degree of fidelity in this space, what are the implications on the rest of the students in this space. So I think all that for me is really important, but the other element that I don't want to lose track of that I think is, we talk about, we don't want to put a bond out there and have it fail, or because it's this middle school, tied to this middle school vision, but we can't lose sight of the fact that our facilities in period, whether we want to do a middle school or not, we need to invest significantly in our facilities. So we need to go to our taxpayers with a bond no matter what. It's just a question of when. And how much, when might we get funding through the state or support through the state for that? What does it look like? Are we trying to renovate? Are we trying to build new? What's most cost effective? That question of how much money do we keep putting into a building that we know has systems that are outdated or failing, it becomes more expensive to maintain it than it does to tear it down. That we have some of that information from the architects, but it's not clear how that fits in with our priorities educationally at this point. So we've got to merge those things, if I'm making sense with that. So stop there.
Yeah, just kind of following in on that. I have the same sort of concern that Mel's talking about and Ben's talking about, in that if we do a halfway implementation, is that, and part of my concern is if we look at, we were talking about 6, 7, and 8, we've got 320 kids. 7 and 8, we've got 225 kids. And so I'm curious as to, if we tried to do a 7-8 middle school program, making some changes to create the facility, we're gonna be trying to make some changes to sort of accommodate that, and we've got a group of 225, and is that going to really tell us whether this is a good concept or not? Or is it, by the nature of doing it that way, are we, dooming it to failure, sort of? I don't have a clue, and that's where I look for the expertise.
Lindsay?
Oh, 2 questions again. John, is there a reason you're only doing 7th and 8th and not 6th, 7th, and 8th?
Yeah, I think, part of it is just for fit the kids in the available space. But we can also think of it as it's a middle school model as opposed to a junior high model. And if we think of the junior high model and looking at like, this is a preparation, this is program, this part of the vision, that, something we could explore, but it's really preparatory for high school, with really high school geared toward high school preparation. So I think yes, it makes some logistical sense, but also you can shift what the program can do.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, hold on, I had a second part.
Sorry.
Oh,
That's
go
okay.
ahead.
The other thing, I understand what Melanie's saying, but I understand what John's saying too. I feel like I could get behind supporting either closing a school or something along those lines if I could see that, it's closing the school might really hurt at first, but to see the future of what it could be, I feel like I could get behind. So I think either like a proof of concept or some sort of vision, so to speak, that, you know, maybe trying to do something here so that we can get some feedback from the kids, maybe going through that, or just something, because I feel like, you know, saying we can permanently close a school with an idea, and then we close the school, and then the idea doesn't work, it's just hard to get behind that, but I could get behind it if I, you know, could see the good that will come, if that's the right wording.
I have some concerns about moving just the 7th and 8th graders for the practical reason, for practical concerns. What happens to those 6th graders who are left behind? You know, how long do we leave them there? And you know, we've already said that that we're not serving them well, but how well can we serve them if there are just 26 graders left? Also, you need to have teachers who are certified in each area in middle school. So you'd need 4, either teachers who are certified in several subjects, or you'd need to leave 4 teachers behind. And then how do you have enough staff to accommodate a bigger middle school here if you've had to, you know, essentially have 3 middle schools, and then those 6th graders are still left, you know, in an elementary school by themselves, pretty clearly as elementary students then, because they're all by themselves. So I worry about the 6th graders and what happens to them, and then staffing in order to maintain a middle school program for just a few kids here and there.
No, I think you raise a valid concern. I don't have the staffing patterns is, I'm sure, some of the hurdles that we would come across. But, you know, I also think that we have extra space right now, and extra capacity, and I know that is a weakness of ours, but how can we leverage that as a strength? And, you know, and try some, you know, maybe it's extra cost, but minimize risk and try some things, and maybe Floodbrook, you know, maybe it's a smaller cohort kept up there, but maybe it's also specialized programming up there, outdoor education, or maybe it's a trimester where all students, you know, in middle school go up there for a trimester for like a mountain campus experience. I don't know, but there's, you know, again, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to say, here's what the program should look like at the board. Even though I feel like as an educator, I have insight at that, it's not my role here. But I think that giving you know, Randy and the experts, I'm just curious if they have the space. First of all, would they be eager to, like, you know, shape programming with the resources we have, and what would the vision be if there was a vision team put together? You know, I'm really curious if, you know, we gave them some resources, put some money into it, you know, paid them for their time, say, all right, given our resources, how great could this be?
Jim and Melanie?
You know, just seeing as how some of what I was saying was like trying to poke holes in, you know, the 7-8 model, I just wanted to say that, you know, actually, you know, when looking at it at first, I thought the idea of having less impact on our different communities and trying something out like that is a really good concept. And just with any of these concepts, I think as we, you know, it starts to form, then that's when the importance of this sort of a session is, that's where people start throwing out the 6th grade. But so it's, I think it's a good concept, but I just think it, you know, almost anything we are probably going to land on as, gee, this would be a good way to go, is going to have holes in it. And in a way, I tend to think of, you know, again, this is where I was saying this could be an iterative process where we end up, you know, here are 2 different ideas that we'd like to kind of get the expertise of the superintendent on. You know, if we can come up with holes, she can come up with more holes, and you know, present to us, you know, the pluses and minuses of going different directions.
Melanie?
I don't want to lose, I would also caution of not losing sight of what we have planned and the work that we've done. Coming up with a, like a satellite program, while we're also coming up with a new program, which is something we've not discussed, wasn't part of any of the middle school visioning, just feels like a whole lot of work. While I love the idea, I don't remember any satellite programming part of the middle school discussion, right? So to then move and totally pivot in this other place for a temporary fix feels like a distraction from what we are trying to achieve. But I also, the other point I kind of want to bring up is, Lindsay, you said, before we close the school, we want to know this middle school will work. I still see these as very different topics. What's working at the or what is or isn't working at the elementary school is not directly tied to whether or not we build a middle school or we bring the middle schoolers together. That we have identified that there are some issues. We need to look for solutions. Building middle school does not address any of the issues that are happening or any of the inequities that are happening at our elementary level. So I still think that conversation needs to be had and needs to be explicitly addressing them, and I understand how it could relate if we need to push kids out into the elementary schools, but then again, I feel like that's a matter of time and it's just a holding ground. We may end up bringing kids from MEMS to Sunderland to fulfill, the social gaps for 2 years until we build the middle school and then we bring them back. That feels like more of a disruption to me. So I'd like to, I'd love to have that discussion about elementary separately and then decide how we move forward.
John and Ben?
Yeah, thanks for letting me respond. Yeah, I wasn't saying that there absolutely should be a satellite program. I don't want to create a straw man out of that. I'm saying it could be. My point was that, with a general model, the 7A model, could it be a possibility? Let's give our expert educators the space to explore and play and see what, maybe come to us with what it could be. So satellite was just an example. I don't want to get off track with that. In the 6th grade, and one more point, the 6th grade, maybe it's, they're hearing Floodbrook parents, maybe think also about the 7A, to be more palatable for, Floodbrook parents going down the mountain. And this is like where I want to hear from, those middle school parents. Is it 6th grade, kids are still pretty young, and to bust down a mountain, every day of the week, that, could be a lot, and so I'd want to, there's stakeholder groups that, I'd want to hear from, but would it feel more appropriate in 7th, 8th grade, a little bit farther, if you knew the kids, after school, your kids could walk into town, and your kids could participate in 7th, 8th grade sports, and I also received heightened programming.
Ben and then Melanie?
So I feel like I want to do a little more like backwards planning in a sense of like, because we're diving into this, like how do we most quickly get to a middle school program, and I think that has value, but I think to me I'm getting stuck up with what happens next, because I think. And this is in some of the, a couple of the options that were laid out in the longer term section of that memo, these are not necessarily all my ideas. I was trying to just fill out what I had heard, and but to me, I was really pulling between questioning whether are we going to go as a district because of pressures from the state, because of demographics, all the rest of it, towards a full consolidated elementary model, where we have essentially moved to have a consolidated Valley Elementary School and a Mountain Elementary School and a consolidated middle school. So as a district, we ultimately run 3 schools. Are we going to that extreme? Is that where we see our future? Or do we see our future investing in having more distributed elementary schools, whether that's we have a southern Valley School that's based in Sunderland, we have a Northern Valley School that's based in Danby, and we have a Central Valley School that's based in Dorset or Manchester. And then we have a Mountain Elementary School, and then we have a consolidated middle school. So we operate 4 elementary schools, or 3 elementary schools and 1 consolidated middle school. How do we see our future? Because if we close one of our elementary schools, and in the example that we use, and that I put in the memo, it's closing Dorset essentially, or, and having the central school be either in Manchester or Dorset, one or the other, right? We could, by sort of saying, okay, well, let's redistrict essentially our school boundaries based on where the populations are and sort of balance the populations. So people, kids who live in South Manchester might end up in Sunderland because it's not the Sunderland school anymore, it's the South T&G school. And students who live in East Dorset, might end up in Danby because they're actually closer, and that's the northern school. And so we can end up balancing our population more easily and populating those schools. But I don't know, our long-term trend is that our demographics our population is still declining. And so what's the role of us as a school board to sort of anticipate that and invest? Because if we invest in renovating any of these schools or building a new school, this is a 50-plus year investment that we're gonna make. And our demographic projections right now are only good a few years out. So so for me, so it really depends how aggressively are we moving towards do we move towards the middle school if we're gonna try to invest in that more distributed model, or if we're anticipating that we're gonna really go to consolidation. So I don't know if the board wants to engage in that conversation, but for me, that's about getting stuck with that a little bit.
Because you brought up school closure, I have a question for the board before I get to Lindsay's comment. When we met up at Floodbrook, I asked the room, what should the school board do if there's a fundamental tension between what might be viewed as the best outcome for a specific community, a specific town or district, versus what's viewed as the best thing for the students? And a Sunderland resident said, well, the health of the community is necessary to provide our kids with the best upbringing. When Randy is putting together her recommendation, how much weight should she give that comment?
Community is laid right out in our global ends policy, isn't it?
There's also a response to that comment that, another parent got up and said that, we can sort of recreate communities. I mean, it's our job to, communities aren't necessarily static, so there were two points of views raised.
My
They were
question
conflicting.
is, how much time should Randy spend in her recommendation addressing the whole concern about the effect on community?
Well, I think closing a school will affect different communities in different ways.
Right.
There's nothing really going on in Danby other than the school. You shut down elementary school in Manchester or Dorset, there's an awful lot more going on in those towns where the community can be focused.
Okay.
I'll just, can I just
I think.
read our
actually,
global
Lindsay,
ends?
you want to speak to that? Yeah, sure.
Yeah. All students in the Taconic and Green Regional School District will develop the knowledge, skills, and dispositions needed to become equity-minded global citizens at a reasonable course that supports the essential roles that schools play in our community.
That's our policy 1.0, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure is. I just think it's in writing, we might as well consider it.
So one thing I just wanted to respond to Melanie, as much as the elementary and the middle school are two different things, they are intertwined, because if we make MEMS the middle school, those elementary students get dispersed. If we close a school, those kids get dispersed. So as much as I know they are two separate things. In my head, they are intertwined. But I just wanted to say, Ben's idea that I had not considered that you just mentioned, where you had like a north, central, and southern school, and not naming them after the towns, but that way, I hadn't heard that, and I actually, think that could be something worth looking into. I don't know if Randy's ever heard that idea or not, but
Well, that was it's on pages 20, 21 through 23 of the packet. It's in there. Randy's had a chance to digest it, I don't know.
You wrote that in an email.
did you put it that way, north, central, and south?
I didn't use those.
Okay, maybe just
Well,
those words.
Just to piggyback on that, having sort of regional elementary schools also is in line with that article that you sent this morning, clean as far as the equity in closing small schools, and so.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a broken record, but I'll just mention again that at Floodbrook, none of our 4 towns has had a local school since 1960. And each of our towns has a pretty vibrant community, although I was talking to Ben about it and the community is everybody, it's not just the kids. It may not be, it's not quite the same as a school community for kids, but there certainly is a sense of belonging to the town without the school there.
Yeah, I think it's been a good discussion, and I think we've given Randy some thoughts relative to priorities. I think we have to be a little careful about being too prescriptive at this point in time. Give her a little latitude to look at the research, look at the comments by the public, look at the comments that we've made, but not get too prescriptive. Give her some latitude to develop the recommendation that makes sense based on her knowledge and the evidence that is out there on issues associated with educational quality and things of that nature. The other thing I would just note, and it probably goes without saying, is that we would like, or I shouldn't say we would like, it's important to have a timeline, I think, associated, and that obviously goes without saying, but to have that timeline relative to the implementation schedule of any recommendation, because certain things certainly are not going to happen tomorrow. They're going to be in the out years.
I guess I would ask Randy, is there any questions you have from us on how we are feeling forward in our direction specifically?
I don't think so. You're saying a lot, and it's a terrific conversation, and I think for me and my thinking, so many of the comments have reinforced things that I have been thinking and feeling and hearing as well, and hearing your responses and thoughts has been really, really helpful. I'm sitting here just feeling, I think, I compelled to thank all of you, because this is really hard work, and the commitment you've made to this process and to hearing and listening and considering, and the way in which you communicate and interact with each other, I'm just really grateful, and I just feel like I publicly want to acknowledge what a healthy board you are at a time in which there are plenty of places that could not engage in a discussion like you just had. So that makes me feel confident that as we continue to work through this together, that we will land on what is ultimately best for all of our kids and communities. And that doesn't mean it will be easy, and it doesn't mean that it won't be without some loss, but I am 100% in the space of, what are we building for the future of our communities and our kids? What is the work we're doing now about our future? And I think that that's a big shift for me conceptually of that really is what we are doing now, right? We are building now for the future, for decades. And what does that commitment mean? And how do we set our kids now and our kids in the future up for the best education we can? And we've got a lot of great information to work from. So thank you. And there's a lot of work ahead of all of us.
I just wanted to say, I just want to say thank you to you too, Randy. I mean, of everybody in all the towns, you're the person who has given this the most thought, who's weighed everything, who continues to, shift and weigh, and I'm confident that you'll do exactly what you said. Thank you.
There was mention of timeline. Would the board agree that it's the most important thing is to get it right, not necessarily to get it in next month or something? Because if that wouldn't get it right.
Meaning, what do you mean by that, basically?
Well,
That we don't, are you saying we don't have to do the product quickly, we want to do it right? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't talking about that, I was talking about a timeline relative to implementation when the product is done.
That should be part of the proposal.
Right, correct, yeah, not part of what.
And can we move on, or is there still some more comment about this? Bear in mind, it is 8 o'clock, we have a number of other things we have to cover. Melanie and John?
I guess this is a quick question for Randy, and I don't know that you can answer now. But how soon would you need to have a vote from the board if we were to implement changes for next year? What would that timeline have to look like? And maybe you need to
It
tell us
probably
next month.
depends on the scope, but I would say we would have to have some direction by January.
Okay.
I think waiting past then is not feasible.
Okay, thank you.
John?
It's just for the next step, where to next is that Randy will come back, you're gonna come back to us with, your distilled, some sort of recommendation or something, you're coming to us next. Yeah.
Well, I guess I just want to, that's a great question, and I would have had a similar question, but the question I would ask first is, based on the conversation we had at the beginning of this discussion, it was giving the board enough time to talk through what you all needed, and then once that was completed, you would say, yes, we would like you to come back to us with something. So I think that one, if yes, we've sort of exhausted the discussion at this point, there's no big topics to raise that haven't been, then if you as a board say, we'd like you to, come as soon as you have something ready, then I think that honors the don't rush it, get it right, and then something will come.
Great.
I don't feel like there was any consensus. This was all ideas and discussion. Do you feel like you need a consensus, or at least some direction for us, or you're fine with everyone being everywhere?
I am fine with everybody being everywhere.
Okay.
Because I think.
Just want to make sure.
I mean, honestly, I think that will continue to likely be the way the discussions go until you have something to work from.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just think there was a lot of consensus on priorities, I think.
Yep, agreed, and I heard those.
And I think we can move forward, or you can move forward on that. That's where I stand.
Thank you. The one remaining item under that is whether you want to authorize the Community Engagement Committee to draft a proposed non-binding article for the warning. This would be for votes in March regarding school reconfiguration. And that would be best if that were done, that it would be presented at the December meeting. I'm not guaranteeing that the Community Engagement Committee can come up with such a thing, but the initial question is, do you even want us to try?
For what?
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
gonna say. Isn't that putting the cart before the horse a little
Yeah,
bit?
what would we put on the, what are we proposing?
I don't know.
Right.
Or you guys are gonna be meeting, so you can figure it out.
I mean, we don't have anything to propose.
No, but it would
Right.
seem
I
that
agree.
we really need to
Yeah.
have that first feedback from Randy.
Yeah.
At some point, and that may not happen for a while.
If that's ever a motion, it's not one we should consider, right?
Right.
Okay.
Can I, Herb, I'm sorry, can I just jump back to B for a minute?
Yeah.
Are you ready, have you finished a conversation enough? And are you asking me to come when I'm ready? Or is there more discussion before I start tackling it?
No, I think we're asking you to come when you're ready.
Okay, I just want to be really clear, this is important, and
Want a
I-
I
motion?
thought she was gonna come to us now.
I just want to know that we're all on the same page and that's what you're ready for from me when it's ready to be shared with you.
Do you want a motion or no?
I would actually, yeah.
I'll move it.
sure.
I'll second it.
The motion is, Randy should change her recommendation.
You're
when it's
ready for recommendation when it's ready.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. Anybody opposed, raise your hand. Anybody abstaining? That
I would
passes
abstain.
unanimously.
I'm gonna
Sorry,
abstain.
Oh, you abstain?
Sorry, yeah.
So is Lindsay.
I don't
Yeah.
feel like we've given her any direction whatsoever. And I feel that we as a board, it is our responsibility to direct her. And in a way, I feel like we're shirking our responsibility and putting it all on Randy. So it makes me a little bit uncomfortable to say at this point with that discussion that we're done, we don't need to say anything more, we don't need to make decisions. We want you to do that for us. That's why I'm
Well,
abstaining.
you abstain, but
So I'm
we're-
not
we're-
disagreeing,
we're
but
a
I'm just,
policy governance board.
right, which means we're supposed to direct the superintendent, right?
No.
Sorry.
No, we tell her what our goals are.
Right.
We don't tell her how to do it.
Correct, yes.
No,
Yes.
never mind,
Yeah.
never mind, at this point.
Yes.
So that vote was
Unanimous. No, not unanimous. We had one abstention.
No, I abstained.
two abstentions for the record?
Who abstained?
Yeah,
Lindsay and Mel.
Thank you.
there you go.
Thank you.
All right.
No, thank you.
Let's go to legislative and
No, thank you.
Vermont School Boards Association updates. Jim, anything on the commission on the future of public education in Vermont? I meant to listen to their last meeting, but then they moved it, so I didn't hear it.
Right, they continue to meet, they also have a finance committee and a few other committees. Key thing to keep in mind is, it's moving together kind of slowly. One thing to keep in mind, they are actually looking at coming up with proposals that they're supposed to present for the short-term proposals in December of this year, and then their longer-term proposals next year. There's nothing specific on the table right now. VSBA, VASBO, and VSA presented a memo with some thoughts. I can swing that around, I can send that around to people if you want. They had a memo, just like a 2.5-page memo. Here are some thoughts on the short term. How to approach the question of what the short term, drivers should be to suggest to that the commission should suggest to the legislature. I've actually engaged a little bit with the ideas were actually pretty reasonable. If you don't mind, I could share with the board the memo from VSBA, and also then Oliver Olson, who's on the commission. He wrote a sort of a rebuttal to a bunch of those points. Actually, and I discussed it a lot with Oliver. On most of the points, actually, they're not bad points at all. There's one that was definitely sticking his craw and a bit mine as well. And Oliver asked me to potentially write something to support that, to write something to the commission. So I'm wondering whether the board might feel comfortable with me doing that. But the point was the VSBA was suggesting that one possibility is that independent schools could be asked to only get tuition equal to the annual announced tuition rate. And you'll see in the note that the annual announced tuition rate is just is the rate that is, it's sort of an artificial rate. Oliver made a good job of tearing it apart. It's also, would be another one of those impossible ideas for communities like ours to handle, because, if the independent schools could only charge that rate and we couldn't ask our communities to approve a higher rate, then, the question is, okay, do parents have to come up with a difference, or what? It creates a massive set of problems. So I told Oliver I would try to write something up as a support for his concerns on that. I could do that just for myself, or I could do it for the board. But I'd be happy to send those 2 memos around to the board.
Great.
If you want to do it before our next meeting, then we could endorse it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're comfortable with that, I just, I think everybody knows where I stand on the issue, and I think I understand where the board stands, so I would stay in bounds.
Yeah, I saw the memo, and as a BBA employee, and I recuse myself from that tuition one, because that's certainly direct implications for myself. But one of the aspect of that memo was minimum ratios, teacher to student ratio. And I'm just really curious how much heat that's going to have. That'd be pretty, that would be.
Well, with minimum student-teacher ratios with opt-outs for a variety of things, which is.
Yeah, rural schools too, and so, yeah, it's as much, you
Right.
can keep us, you do a great job keeping us abreast, but that's going to be, that could really direct our conversations.
I will guarantee you that's gonna get a lot of play in the legislature, the idea of minimums.
Yeah, I mean, the governor wants to beat us up on that one.
Yeah. No, after yesterday's election, I think it goes without saying that cost containment and the issue of high property taxes have gone from one of the highest priorities in the legislature to probably the highest. That election yesterday was a wake-up call for the Democratic majority, I think, and it sounds like they're all on board and trying to do something significant and doing it sooner than later.
And this also ties into the next point on the agenda, which is the choice designation is, there's not gonna be any error in the room for that issue probably this year. Thank goodness, because of the budget issues. So is that,
You've all heard me say that we are violating our oaths of office by not solving that problem.
Never heard you say that.
yeah. So is it a straw vote, sort of like, can I write something, I'll send you whatever I write, but
It better be good.
give me an okay?
Well,
Okay, you can help me.
we can't do an electronic vote on it. So,
No, I can,
would
if,
it be too late to have it sent out after our next meeting?
yes.
It would be too late.
Yeah, they're having a meeting like tonight or tomorrow or something, and I just want to get this to them. It's, it's relatively short and sweet. One thing I was thinking of drawing in is in 2023, I wrote a memo that was presented to the House Education Committee. You guys saw it too. It was all about, gee, if you get rid of the independent schools, we have nowhere to go. And, it went through the, what are all there are no public high schools in our area. So at our borders, we've got, Arlington, Mill River and all, and it kind of went into how many slots they would have, and it was just like, there is no alternative for us, guys. So I was gonna include that as an exhibit, and then just basically, support on the annual allowable tuition is not a real number, and it's just basically, it doesn't work. Right now, we have a system where we have to ask our communities for approval. That works.
So those are the 2 major points. I mean, we could authorize Jim to come up with the exact language and vote on it right now. Somebody want to make a motion?
So moved.
What's exactly the
I'm
motion?
in support of Jim writing a letter that centralizes those 2 points that were just outlined
On behalf of the board?
on behalf of the board.
Whatever they were.
Seconded by David. Any discussion?
It's one with tuition, right? You say?
The annual allowable tuition, you know, saying that does not work with our system. You know, that is a proposal.
I do have one question, and that is, I don't know if it's worth doing the calculation, but if they did enact that law, it's only affecting those schools with choice, so does it move the needle very much in terms of tax savings?
Oh, no, it's not gonna, it's one of those, it's attacking the
So it-
system like ours, it's not gonna save very much money.
Okay.
And-
That was my point, is that they must be proposing it as a way, as a cost containment. And so I thought if we unpack that, it doesn't really contain costs.
Yep,
Then
it's,
that's an important point to raise.
it's not gonna be, if you added up all the districts, because, you know, we have Burton at a bit over 20,000. You've got some of the independent schools charging as much as close to 24,000. So it could end up, the annual allowable tuition, again, it's not a real number because some schools don't tuition really any kids, but they still have to put a tuition number out there. So they put numbers out, and there's, Oliver points out one school, I think, whatever, Williston or whoever, that, essentially they haven't changed their annual allowable tuition rate for years and years and years, and it's still like $13,000, but then they actually do a chargeback to bring it up close to 20,000. But, they're saying limit it based upon the annual allowable, and, that doesn't work.
Do you have a link to Oliver's?
I'll send it out. I'll send the message, the memo from the VSBA and others, and Oliver's response to it. Oliver also had a really good sort of a couple suggestions on what they could consider as versus the, right now there's the excess spending cap idea, and he came up with one that is slightly different, essentially allowing lower spending districts more room to increase their budgets than high spending districts. It's an interesting idea, and I think you'll all enjoy it.
Okay, so we have a motion to have Jim do the final drafting on
Good,
a letter addressed to, who's it addressed to?
That'll
a
be
good
to
letter.
the Commission on the Future of Public Education.
Understanding letter, a good letter.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Melanie and John, you're abstaining, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Recusing.
Anybody opposed, please raise your hand. And anybody abstaining? Okay.
It's okay now? It's easier. Sorry.
Thank you.
All right. Any items that you can think of now that belong on a future agenda?
Okay, I have one. This was, and I brought this up with you and Mel over email, public comment, in the written comments, should they be made available to the public, as long as we're upfront about that and say, public comment will be public. I think my understanding is that largely public comments are made public, and so, they don't have to submit the names, but, I don't know if we can talk about now, or talk about the next meeting, but.
For context, you're asking, this is because we discussed whether or not we should publish what was come through with a QR code link.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that's clear. And that we're unclear, I guess, on whether or not that should be shared publicly or not.
It's public information though, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that, I don't know if it is.
I would say so.
People requested that they could have it anyway, but I think we just need to be upfront about it.
I'll put on the next agenda, publishing public comment on reorganization, because that was what it was about, right?
Yeah, but I would say will apply forever, what we just,
Okay. Any other items for the future agenda? It says here, board self-evaluation, please don't leave the room without handing me your evaluation unless you're going to.
Do we have any hard copies here?
It wasn't included in the.
Right.
It wasn't
Really?
good.
No. I have one, so we can get some.
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
We've got a copy machine. I'm sure that somebody in the room,
Yeah, somebody.
And you should all have
Somebody-
an email
Making a
from me
few
that has
copies.
that, that's still
I
the
do,
same,
but-
but I mean, everybody else, if you, it's on your phone, search for an email from me, you have
Just
it.
keep the tab open.
It's, yeah, it's not, I don't change it, it just, new dates get put in.
Where is it? Yeah, right.
Really? We'll send
Looks
it right
like,
now.
it looks like Principal Turner is all ready to make a copy if you need it.
Look at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank
Now
you.
I'll falter at the copy machine, and that'll be.
I thought Celeste was gonna do it.
All right.
I know,
I
she
will
didn't
do-
step up.
Does anybody want me to share it electronically, or are we gonna just do paper?
Pardon?
How many?
Yeah, go ahead and send it.
How many
Right.
people need a paper one?
I'm gonna do it online.
I don't
Yeah, I'll do it.
One, two, three,
How
four.
about
Yeah,
eight?
thank you.
Might as well.
Get half a dozen anyway.
I like old school.
Jen, like maybe 6 or 7,
You can do it.
or 15.
No, I'm like, wait,
Where are you gonna
Board
find it?
meeting self-evaluation.
yeah,
While she's
yeah,
doing that,
it's always the same link.
let's go back.
How'd you find
to
it?
the
Found it.
Where, how?
ending- Folks, let's
Just
go
look for an
back to
email
the
from me.
ending public comment
I did.
period, which we promised in our agenda. Does any member of the public want to make a comment? Yes, ma'am.
Question, Ben, the model that Ben discussed with the couple locations being regionalized, that's the first I've heard of this idea. Was that published somewhere, or?
Yes, it's in the agenda packet for this meeting.
Oh,
Get that on the DRSU website.
But that was never presented to the public.
No, 'cause
via
it
any of the-
was only written a few days ago.
Okay, so if the board discusses that concept model anymore, would that then be presented to the public? Because that seems to be a bit different than that ecosystem, EVA ecosystem theory of Manchester that David
Complicate things.
right? Now we're talking about this person, middle school is actually further, or would we still have the Manchester?
Well,
one?
it's public information, it's in the agenda packet. I don't anticipate us voting on that because we've asked Randy to come with their own recommendation. Unless it was
Take
the
one
same
and pass
thing.
it.
Yeah, I guess so.
So just to clarify that,
Actually, I'll just pass it
you
around.
can, these are,
You take
I drafted a memo with John Wilson.
Okay.
It was an attempt to sort of distill out what we had heard and what some possible options for reconfiguration might be based on that feedback. So that was one of the longer term options that's there. So you can read just over the details of it, but the idea would be to have, that I was trying to talk about was having, essentially 3 valley elementary schools, so north, south, central, and a mountain. Right, so four elementary schools that wouldn't be town defined, but really sort of population defined of the district. So that kind of does fit within the ecosystem model. It's saying, it's not just kids who live in Sunderland go to the south, but it's sort of like the southern third of the valley, students would go to that school. And then, right?
Sounds like I'm a Dorset resident, so Dorset would really get divided.
So Dorset would either go, yeah, I mean, and again, like, we haven't tried to map out, wherever everybody actually lives, but, East Dorset might be closer to North, and Dorset proper might be closer to Manchester, or, and do we use our existing properties, in which case, does Mem become the centralized middle school, and Dorset becomes the central elementary school, or do we, there's a lot that's undefined with that, so.
Sure,
Herb.
so it just seems like that would be a whole nother large discussion.
Ben, can we cut this a little short because it's a public document in the agenda packet. It's not something we anticipate Randy coming up with word for word.
Right.
She could, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear that there'll be, correct me if I'm wrong, there'll be plenty of opportunity for public input as we go along this process,
I
so.
think it actually ties into the beginning of the meeting when you guys talked about what to distribute. But remember when you guys talked about social media or how to distribute things?
Yeah.
Like a document like that seems like a very important one if it was gonna be.
Right, that was part of the agenda, but yeah, right.
I think you guys discussed what do we communicate? That seems like a great one, and even those presentations you've done previously with the goals of the board, right? Your PRSU annual goals, like those would be great ones, I think, to distribute to the community, to know what you guys are working towards.
Do you, so all of that being in the agenda sometimes be 100 pages long. Is that, are you specifically asking to receive links to that or receive like a PDF as a parent?
I think would be nice. Yeah, it's tricky to find, like, you have to go into the agenda and then click what the item is, and then sometimes I click the right link, and other times it doesn't bring anything up, but.
You're talking about through the web agenda. Is that what you mean?
Yes, the one on the calendar.
Right.
on the RCA.
Right, which is not a
Just
PDF.
having that PDF in an email, that, you know, kind of saying, like, this is what's being presented. Maybe not the detail of board stuff, but those specialized presentations that you guys do review, seem to be very valuable and how well put in information.
I tend to think the only practical way of doing this is via link. And you probably should talk to the BRSU office if the links aren't working for you. They've always worked for me, for example. So there may be something about your computer system that doesn't like theirs or vice versa.
Herb, I think she's talking specifically when you go to the BRSU agenda, like our web page, and you go to calendar, those web agendas are clunky at best. I have a really hard time navigating, getting to where I need to go, and I think that's what she's talking about specifically. We could send a link to a PDF, and that's different than what you're specifically referencing. You're talking about the gray page where you click on an item and there might be a PDF or not.
Other public comment? All right. We do have a couple of items for executive session, and we have to ask the public to leave for that.